sat at a table for one until the Mafia boss whispered, "Tonight, you're my wife." Chicago rain drew shimmering veins of light across the streets, spilling through Bellero's windows as trembling silver. Candles flickered over white linen, throwing slender shadows that swayed like my own heartbeat. Cutlery glowed beneath the honeyed lamps, the kind of light that tries to make everything look softer, even a lonely birthday. I sat alone at a corner table, the faded black dress my best remaining option. 27. A discounted cupcake, a cheap glass of wine poured with immaculate manners, and a smile I had to borrow. I told myself I was fine, that my daughter Mia was asleep at home with Mrs. Lopez, that I could pass this night the way I've passed so many, quiet, frugal, alone. A table for one, the 3 words I'd given the hostess 15 minutes ago, kept echoing like a confession. A waiter bent at my elbow, voice professionally neutral. "Would you like another glass while you wait?" Beneath it lay a silk-smooth, blade-sharp assumption. No one was coming. No thank you. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Just the check. I meant to end this treat before it swallowed half my week's budget. Single motherhood leaves no room for luxuries. $12 wine means a thinner breakfast, a late electric bill, and Mia's homework printed on the back of a flyer. I thumbed through my phone, pretending to look for messages I knew weren't there. At 6, Mia deserves more than I can give, more than hand-me-downs, more than the times she begged for ballet, and I swallowed hard and said, "Next year." I've been almost invisible my whole life, to foster parents who remembered stipend dates better than birthdays, to teachers who never saw the straight A's, to the man who vanished the moment I said I was pregnant. Invisible among murmuring couples, whispered deal dinners, contained laughter. Invisible even here, trying to look ordinary. And then the air changed, like static gathering before a storm. Conversation dropped a degree, silverware paused for a breath. The glass door opened, carrying in cold rain and held back thunder. Through the wet blur, I saw 3 black SUVs slide to the curb, sleek as the night. Men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning with the ease of those fluent in danger. One opened the rear door of the center car. He stepped out as if the ground belonged to him. Tall, broad, in a charcoal suit that might cost more than 6 months of my rent. Groomed black hair, a jaw like a cut line, stubble trimmed as if by ruler. He moved with the unhurried certainty of a predator who knows nothing escapes. The name Dominic Caruso whispered through the room, like a spark catching dry grass. Spines straightened. The manager almost ran, bowing him toward the center table. Power has a sound. I heard it in the neat hush, in the way eyes dipped, in an expensive cologne that seemed to reach my wrist though he was a row away. I lowered my head, wishing myself smaller. When I looked up, he was already looking at me. Steel gray eyes pinned me like a compass needle. Something, a calculation, and strangely, a familiar emptiness, glinted and was gone. He left his table before I could turn. His shadow fell long across my linen. His voice, low and rough, with a trace of Italian, said the sentence that stunned me and the room alike. "My wife is here." I blinked. The staff glanced from him to me, then, misreading, smiled politely and invited me up. "This way, ma'am." A chair slid out with a soft sigh. I think you've made a mistake," I murmured. But Dominic tilted his head, a courtesy so precise it felt like pressure, and pulled out the chair at the center table. "I haven't," he said, "just for me." "Sit down, Elena." He said my name as if it were obvious. Blood drained from my face. How could he know? Before I could ask, he leaned closer, rain and cologne stitched together, his voice drawn thin as wire. "If you want to live, don't ask anything, just smile." I followed his gaze. At the far end, a cluster of men in dark suits watched us. Their eyes were metal. A chill slid down my spine. "Smile," Dominic said, lifting his glass with a command disguised as gentleness. "Toast with me. We don't want them suspicious, do we?" My hand shook, but our glasses met with a small sound like a contract sealing. We played spouses for strangers between trembling candles and rain smearing the glass. I heard my heartbeat and that odd echo inside his voice, a buried loneliness I recognized instantly because it sounded like mine. When dessert arrived, Dominic leaned a fraction, not looking at me and somehow touching me all the same. "From now on, call me husband. I'll explain once we're out." I should have stood and left, said no. Instead, I nodded. Dinner ended on a silence taut as string. When we rose, his hand came to the small of my back, warm, steady, impossible to refuse. "Let's go, Mrs. Caruso," he said. And just like that, my careful, frugal, solitary life swerved onto a road I knew had no way back. The black car sliced through the rain. I sat pressed against the door, clutching my purse like a charm against whatever world I'd been dragged into. Dominic Caruso sat beside me, silent. Only the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the flare of passing streetlights cut through the dark like shards of glass. "I don't understand what's happening," I said, voice hoarse with fear. "Who are you? Why did you pull me into this?" He didn't look at me. "You're safe, for now." I gave a shaky, bitter laugh. "Safe? You just kidnapped me from a restaurant." "Trust me," he interrupted, voice like steel grinding stone. "Trust me, or at least pretend to, if you want your daughter to keep sleeping peacefully tonight." My heart stuttered. He'd said daughter. I turned sharply. You know about Mia?" For the first time, Dominic looked at me. That gaze froze me to the bone. "I know everything, Elena." The car stopped beneath the awning of a luxury high-rise downtown. A man opened the door for him, bowing slightly. Dominic stepped out, didn't glance back. "Come with me," he said. I had no choice but to follow. Inside, it was a private lounge, warm light, slow jazz, the perfect contrast to the storm outside. He took a seat in a corner booth, motioned for me to sit across. "Drink," he said, sliding a glass of watered whiskey toward me. I didn't touch it. "What do you want from me?" Dominic leaned back, eyes steady. "A role. You played it well tonight." I frowned. "A role?" "The role of my wife," he said, as if that explained everything. "Marco DeLuca's men are watching me. If they think I'm married, they'll stop trying to get close." I shook my head. "And you chose me, a stranger?" He tilted his head slightly. Not exactly a stranger." I froze. "What does that mean?" He looked at me for a long moment, weighing something between truth and restraint. Then he unlocked his phone and laid it on the table. On the screen, photos of me, in uniform, carrying trays at the hotel where I worked. Another of me picking up Mia from school, hugging her, smiling. I went cold. "You were following me?" Dominic didn't deny it. "Observing." "Why?" "Because you're clean. No debts beyond the bank. No ties to any crew. And because I needed someone I could trust." I stared. "Trust? You invaded my life." He replied, calm as a judge. "If I hadn't, you'd be dead in your apartment 3 nights ago." Air thickened. I trembled. Marco DeLuca sent men to your neighborhood. He's hunting me and anyone who can weaken me. He thinks Mia is my daughter. I shook my head. No, that's impossible. Dominic's tone softened, almost regretful. I had my men move you and your daughter somewhere safe before I came to Bellero. My body went cold. You touched her? No, but my men did, to make sure she's protected. I shot to my feet. You had no right. His voice dropped, rough and quiet. I have every right when your life's hanging by a blade. In that moment, I realized he wasn't lying. Beneath that granite calm, I heard something real. Dominic Caruso was fighting something far more dangerous than power, loss. And somehow I had become part of it. I sat back slowly, my pulse a drumbeat in my throat. He watched me in silence. You'll stay at my estate for a few days, he said. When I'm sure DeLuca's lost interest, you can leave. I met his gaze, part fear, part defiance. And if I refuse, he leaned forward, gray eyes cutting into mine. Then you and your daughter won't live to see tomorrow. The words froze me. Outside, the rain fell harder, as if the sky itself was warning me. I drew a shaky breath, looked straight at him. I'll stay, but I want the truth. Dominic nodded once, voice sinking to something almost like a promise. You'll have it, Elena, all of it, soon. When we left the lounge, the rain hadn't stopped. Dominic didn't speak again. Only the steady hum of the engine filled the car as city lights blurred behind us. I had no idea where he was taking me, only that Chicago was fading into darkness, and the road ahead seemed endless. Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice catching in my throat. Home, I turned toward him. Whose home? Mine, Dominic said, eyes fixed on the road, and for now, yours. Hours later, the car turned off the highway onto a tree-lined path leading toward Lake Michigan. When the wrought iron gates opened, my breath caught. What stood before me wasn't a house, it was another world. A vast white stone mansion, 3 stories high, surrounded by manicured gardens and marble pillars, like something out of an old Italian dream. Lights shimmered across the wide glass windows, reflecting on the lake like broken pieces of crystal. The air smelled of rain, wet wood, and something pure yet cold. I stepped out, feeling impossibly small before the structure. You live here? I asked. Dominic nodded, his tone flat, without pride or modesty. My family called it Villa Caruso. Now it's just me. The man who opened the door bowed with military precision. Inside, men in black suits stood at intervals along the corridor, motionless, watchful. They weren't just guards, I could feel it. They were soldiers, trained to kill if necessary. As we walked through the grand hall, I was swallowed by its beauty. Carved ceilings, chandeliers blazing with light, oil paintings perfectly aligned. Yet instead of warmth, I felt emptiness. Everything was too perfect, too silent, like a museum preserved for ghosts. A woman appeared at the top of the staircase, tall, poised, wearing a white suit. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. Lucia Caruso, Dominic introduced, my sister. Lucia's eyes swept over me, her smile tight. So, this is your wife? I opened my mouth to speak, but Dominic cut in. Lucia, not now. She descended slowly, voice soft but edged. Interesting. You've never believed in coincidence, yet you bring home a stranger in the middle of the night. She's not a spy, Dominic said quietly. And how can you be sure? Lucia shot back, eyes locking onto mine. My throat went dry. I don't even know what's happening. I just want to go home, to my daughter. Dominic's gaze hardened. You can't. DeLuca knows who you are now. He believes you and your child are my weakness. Going back would be suicide. I shook my head. You're lying. I'm no one. He has no reason to care. Dominic stepped closer, voice low and absolute. DeLuca doesn't need a reason to kill. The air thickened. I trembled. What about Mia? She's safe, he said softly. She's here, East Wing, second floor. My men brought her before we arrived. I stared at him. You brought her here without telling me? It was the only way to ensure no one followed, Dominic said, his eyes softening for the first time. You can see her in the morning. For now, rest. You need it. He turned away, signaling a housekeeper to guide me upstairs. The room they led me to was larger than my entire apartment. Every detail elegant, perfect, and foreign. That night, I didn't sleep. The lake whispered against the shore outside, waves folding into one another like secrets. I sat by the window, staring at my reflection, trying to make sense of it all. Somewhere between fear and disbelief, a truth settled inside me. I had stepped into another man's world, one built on silence, danger, and grief. And whether I liked it or not, there was no way back. The next morning, pale sunlight slipped through the curtains, spilling soft gold over the thick carpet. I couldn't remember when I'd fallen asleep, perhaps after the waves stopped breaking, or after fear grew so heavy it turned into silence. A soft knock startled me. A woman in a black uniform stood at the door, posture perfectly straight. Mr. Caruso invites you and the young lady for breakfast. The moment she said, young lady, my heart leapt before my body did. I nearly ran down the hall. Red carpet stretched between antique paintings and closed wooden doors, until I heard a sound that pulled the air from my lungs, Mia's voice. Look, Uncle, I did it. I stopped in the doorway. Mia sat on a high chair by the long dining table, face bright, stirring milk with a silver spoon. Across from her, Dominic sat in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, morning light catching his dark hair. He was smiling, a real quiet, breathtaking smile. I'd never imagined the man who'd terrified me last night could smile like that. Mama, Mia cried, jumping down and wrapping her arms around me. Her warmth was like a reprieve from a nightmare. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? She shook her head, smelling of milk and sunlight. No, they're nice. Mr. Dominic gave me pancakes and told me stories about castles. I looked at him. Dominic sat still, calm, though his eyes held something I couldn't name. She's smart, he said softly. You have an incredible daughter, Elena. Lucia was there too, standing by the coffee counter, her face visibly tight. Interesting, she murmured, sipping her espresso. You smile for the first time in 6 years, and it's for someone else's child. Dominic's eyes flicked toward her, a shadow crossing his face. Mia isn't a stranger. She's a guest. Lucia smiled thinly. A guest. I just hope you remember what happens when you let your heart get soft, brother. The air thickened. I instinctively drew Mia closer. Dominic set his cup down with a sharp click. Lucia, don't. I'm only stating the truth, she said quietly. Sophia is gone, and so is the little girl. The name Sophia froze him. Silence pressed on the room. I saw his knuckles whiten as his hand tightened. Lucia turned and left, her heels clicking like brittle glass. I didn't move. Dominic exhaled, voice rough. I'm sorry for that. It's okay, I said softly. Sophia, she was your wife. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, 6 years ago, she and our daughter died in an explosion. I didn't ask more. The grief in his eyes said enough. They called it an accident, he went on, almost whispering. But it wasn't. It was DeLuca's first message. Cold washed through me, not from the story, but from the way he said it. Calm, hollow, like a man long accustomed to losing everything he loves. When he turned, light flashed on his hand, and I saw it, the silver ring. A faint scratch glimmered across it. He still wore a silver ring, scarred and simple. After 6 years, the morning drifted into uneasy quiet. Mia colored near the window. I wandered through the halls like someone trespassing a memory. Traces of Sophia were everywhere. Her paintings, a piano, a vase placed with habitual care. The house breathed with her ghost, and I felt like I was walking through someone else's love story, one that had already ended. By nightfall, the mansion fell into a deep, eerie stillness. Wind off the lake rattled the glass. I couldn't sleep. I followed the dim lights down the stairs until I reached a door left slightly open. Dominic's study. He was there, alone, seated at a dark wooden desk. A candle burned low in a silver holder. In front of him, a framed photograph. A blonde woman with a gentle smile and a little girl, maybe 5. Dominic traced a finger over the glass, pausing on the child's face. No tears, just the heavy quiet of someone too used to hurting. I stood in the doorway, breath held. In that moment, he wasn't the ruthless man the world whispered about. He was simply a man trapped in memory, a soul living among the ruins of his own love. And for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone broken, someone whose pain mirrored my own. The days that followed moved slower inside Villa Caruso, as if time itself hesitated there. Each morning, sunlight spilled across the lake, slipping through my curtains like silk. Downstairs, laughter and piano chords mingled in the air. A melody I'd assumed came from a speaker, until I saw Dominic himself at the old mahogany piano, his hands gliding softly over the keys. Mia sat beside him, singing to the notes, her hair catching the light like threads of gold woven into sound. I stood at the staircase, afraid to interrupt. The sight made something tighten in my throat. Dominic looked different. Not the man who commanded with a single glance, but someone patient, gentle, unaware he still had that part of himself left. When the song ended, he looked up. "You're awake," he said. "I heard the music," I replied. "I didn't know you played." He gave a faint shrug. "I used to teach my daughter. Now I'm teaching Mia. She's talented." Mia beamed. "Mr. Dominic says my fingers are softer than Mom's." I laughed. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, there were no walls, no fear. Just 2 people who'd both lost too much, finding a piece of it again in the same child. That afternoon, Dominic took Mia to the lake. He taught her how to float, how to trust the water, his voice low and patient, while Mia's laughter rippled over the waves. I sat on the dock, wind tugging my hair, watching him lift her from the water. The image was so normal, so heartbreakingly human, my chest ached. It had been so long since I'd smiled for real. In those days, Dominic seemed to change too. He stayed home more, spent hours with Mia, and sometimes when he passed me, his gaze lingered a second too long, enough to send my pulse skittering, enough for me to look away and pretend I hadn't noticed. Lucia, of course, noticed everything. One afternoon, she appeared at the door while I was reading with Mia. "My brother isn't easy to trust," she said, leaning against the frame. "If he starts smiling again, it means he's about to lose something." I looked up. "I don't want to take anything from him." Lucia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Good," Then leave while you still can. Don't think you can save him. No one ever has. Before I could answer, she turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her like a verdict. That night, I couldn't focus on a single page. I sat on the balcony, watching the lake darken, her words looping in my head. Who was Dominic really? My protector, or the danger I hadn't seen coming? The sound of the TV drifted up from the hall. Lucia stood there, remote in hand, the glow of the screen painting her in cold light. Breaking news, the anchor said. 3 former Caruso men found dead last night. Authorities suspect ties to Marco De Luca. Dominic entered just as the name hit the air. He took the remote, turned the screen off. This isn't ending soon, Lucia said, her tone sharp. De Luca's expanding. He wants you back in the game. I'm done, Dominic replied. You think he'll let you stay done, or them? Lucia pointed at me. I froze. Dominic's eyes flared. No one touches them, ever. Lucia exhaled, almost sad, and walked away. That night, he doubled the guards. The gates locked by fingerprint. The house glowed bright against the dark, every window a silent warning. Outside, wind raked the water, whispering of storms still far but coming fast. I sat by the window, watching him in the yard, speaking with his men. The floodlights caught his profile, cold, resolute, and terrifyingly beautiful. And in that moment I realized he wasn't just protecting me. He was trying to hold on to something he knew he could lose again. And what frightened me most was that I had begun to want him to. The next morning, with dew still clinging to the leaves and the faint hum of a grounds mower in the distance, Dominic called me down to a small room in the basement, the house's security hub. The light there was sharp and clinical. On the table lay an array of electronics spread out like evidence. Screens showed angles of my former apartment, audio clips time-stamped, and a row of small black devices that looked like spider eyes. I stepped forward, my heart knocking. "Well, what did they find?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dominic pointed to a tiny metal piece, no larger than a thumbnail. "Listening devices," he said, "placed in the bedroom and living room. They captured everything, from the sound of your daughter's breathing to your calls with Mrs. Lopez." It felt like the floor dropped away. I don't remember breathing as the files clicked on. The sound of me singing to my child, whispering to the neighbor, the soft, sleepy exhale of Mia. At first it was ordinary, and then there was a sound, a shoe on linoleum, a man's whisper of an address. I froze when the voice came through. It was a blade across my skin. "Aaron Price," Dominic said, not as a question but as a fact. "He's on the recording." The name landed like ice. Aaron. I wanted to scream, to deny, to run into the room and tear everything apart. But Aaron, the man who had left me when I was pregnant, the man I'd spent years evading, suddenly inhabited the speakers. Thin face, tight mouth, the rough voice that had woken me in the night. He had been the reason I changed numbers, moved apartments, erased traces of myself. I collapsed into a chair, hands to my head. Memories tumbled. The slammed hand against the wall, the threats, the time he yanked me by my hair when I was carrying Mia. The nights I pawned my things to pay hospital bills. I had wrapped myself in silence as armor, and now that armor was torn. Dominic crouched beside me as if to embrace me, but instead he gripped my hand with a fierceness that crackled. His eyes were fire. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "I know he used to be a man, Elena, but if he touches your daughter again..." He stopped, the word choked in his throat. I won't let him breathe. I heard that sentence as both a vow and a sentence. No one should have the power to pronounce life or death over another, and I knew that was the nature of his world, where power grants the right to decide. But in his fury there was something else, a raw, almost sacred rage against someone who had harmed a child. Lucia entered, her smile brittle. "You're going too far," she said sharply but controlled. "Personal vendettas will drag us into bloodshed. Don't let instinct swallow you." Dominic looked at his sister with steel in his eyes. "I say this out of duty, Lucia, for the children, because I've seen what men do. I cannot ignore it." Lucia sighed, fatigue shadowing her face, but there was fear there too. "You lost yourself once over this." She bit her lip. "Don't lose him again." "I won't watch innocents be harmed," Dominic said, flat and immovable. "Especially not that child." He rose and walked to the window, watching the thin rain. "I'll protect my family. I'll protect who's here by any means." I could not stop him with reason. Part of me wanted to say, "Thank you." Another part wanted to yell, "Don't become what you hate." I sat still in his hand, feeling his pulse steady against mine. That night, security tightened. Patrols increased around the lake, cars idled at the gate. Dominic summoned aides, drew maps, and listed possible approaches like a man planning a siege. He prepared as if bracing for a flood. Yet between those cold actions were moments of slack. Dominic in the kitchen at midnight with a cup of coffee, tracing his fingers over the framed photo as if in prayer. I watched him and wondered if he could see the fragility inside me, the fear, the exhaustion, and a secret hunger to be saved without losing myself. I slept with my head in his lap, and in a dream Aaron stood at the doorway like a specter. But this time Dominic moved between us without hesitation. I woke with my heart racing and knew the storm had truly begun. That night, the rain started early. The drops struck against the window pane, streaking down in cold silver lines. Dominic wore a black coat with the collar turned up, his eyes hard as steel when he said he was going to meet Marco De Luca. I remember his voice before he left, calm, deep, certain. "It's just a meeting, one last time." And the way his hand brushed my shoulder, gentle, fleeting, like a promise half spoken and half broken before it even began. He left the villa close to midnight. The sound of the engine merged with the rain, slicing through the stillness like a blade. I stood by the window, watching the red taillights fade behind the trees along the lake, and a strange weight settled in my chest, a quiet knowing that when he returned, something inside him would not be the same. By dawn, he was still gone. The world outside was pale and silent, the lake shrouded in mist. Lucia got the first call while I was in the kitchen, my coffee untouched and cold. She answered without a word for almost a minute. Then I saw the change. The color drained from her face. Her eyes went hollow. She went straight to the office and locked the door. I could hear her voice, low and strained, words that broke apart halfway through. When she came out, I asked immediately, "Where is he?" She didn't answer. I moved closer, my pulse hammering. "Lucia, tell me, where is he?" She stared at me for a long moment before her lips trembled and released 3 words. "An abandoned warehouse." "Where?" "Outskirts of Chicago, where De Luca still does his deals." The air in my chest collapsed. "Did he go alone?" Lucia shook her head, but I saw the fear there. Fear of history repeating itself. fears she didn't dare name. At that same hour, far from the lake, Dominic stood in front of a derelict building reeking of rust and gun oil. The warehouse loomed over the cracked pavement, rain dripping from its broken roof. Dim bulbs hung from frayed wires, their light swaying with every gust of wind. Water dripped from the ceiling, slow and rhythmic, as if counting down to something inevitable. Inside, Marco DeLuca waited behind a battered wooden table. His shadow stretched across the wall like a stain that wouldn't wash away. "Dominic Caruso," he rasped, a smile curling at the edge of his mouth. "Still alive, are you? I almost thought you'd died along with your ghosts." "There's no need to drag this on," Dominic said, his voice calm, too calm. "I didn't come to start a war. I came to end one." "End it?" DeLuca laughed, dry and humorless. "You think I'll sit quiet while you live like a king, and I scrape up what's left of the empire you walked away from? You're a funny man, Dominic." "You can keep your share," Dominic replied. "I won't touch it again." DeLuca leaned back, rolling the unlit cigar between his fingers. "A deal? Peace?" he smirked. "Or just another way for you to pretend you're still the better man? I hear you've got yourself a new wife." His voice sharpened on the words, and something cold flickered in his eyes. "Elena Brooks, isn't it? Brown hair, brown eyes, a little girl, such a sweet kid. I wonder." He leaned forward, his tone dropping to a hiss. "How you'd react if that little girl just disappeared?" Dominic rose so fast the chair toppled behind him. His eyes darkened, deep and deadly as the water before a storm. "Don't say their names, Marco." "Why so tense?" DeLuca sneered. "I'm only curious, but you know how it is. This world's small, and children, well, they tend to wander off." The sharp metallic click of a safety being released cut through the silence. Dominic understood instantly. His gun was up within a breath, but it was too late. Muzzle flash flared. The first bullet tore the air, the second caught his shoulder. Heat and pain exploded through him. He staggered back against a steel pillar, blood blooming through his shirt. His men returned fire. The warehouse erupted into chaos, gunshots cracking like thunder, the stench of gunpowder thick enough to choke. Shadows poured from every corner, DeLuca's men firing back, muzzle flashes strobing the walls. Dominic tried to aim, but his vision swam. He could feel each heartbeat forcing blood through his wound, feel strength slipping away like sand through his fingers. "Fall back," one of his guards shouted, grabbing him, pulling him behind a stack of metal crates. The bullets screamed overhead, chewing through concrete. Dominic lifted his head just enough to see DeLuca still seated, smiling that same cruel, patient smile. It was the last thing he saw before the darkness took him, the grin of a man who had waited years for this moment. The news reached the mansion in the late afternoon. Lucia came into the room, pale as wax, her eyes hollow. I knew before she spoke. "Where is he?" I whispered. Her voice cracked. "He was ambushed. His men got him to a private hospital. He's in critical condition." The words fell like stones into water. I couldn't feel my hands. The floor tilted beneath me, and then the tears came, hot and unending. I wasn't the protected woman anymore. I was just someone terrified of losing the man she loved. Lucia knelt beside me, her voice shaking despite the steel she tried to keep. "Don't love my brother, Elena. Don't." "Why?" I choked. My voice was barely there. "Because it will kill you," she said, her eyes glistening. "Everyone he's ever loved is gone." I stared at her, unable to breathe, listening to the rain pound harder against the glass. Dominic's voice echoed in my mind, just a meeting, one last time. And I knew then, some meetings are never meant to have a return. That night, I knelt in my room before the window where lightning flashed like broken glass. My hands clasped together, trembling as I whispered the only prayer I had left. Please, God, don't take him. Don't take him the way you've taken everything else from me. Thunder rolled over the lake, long and low. A white flash lit the sky, and in the silence that followed, I thought I heard it, his breath, faint and fragile, drifting somewhere through the storm, like a promise that refused to die. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air. The white hospital light fell across Dominic's pale skin, making him look half human, half shadow. I sat beside the bed, my hands gripping the blanket, still unable to believe he had opened his eyes after 2 days of coma. When his eyelids fluttered open, the first thing he looked at was me. He was exhausted, but awake. "Where's Mia?" His voice was hoarse, faint, so soft I had to lean close to catch it. "She's safe," I said quietly. "At the villa, Lucia's with her." He nodded once, relief flickering briefly across his face, before it hardened again. "I need extra guards around the property. No one gets in or out without clearance." He tried to sit up, but pain seized his chest, twisting his expression. "You need to rest," I whispered, pressing his shoulder gently. "You're not healed yet." For a moment, Dominic said nothing. Then his breath came shallow. "DeLuca won't stop." I swallowed hard. "You told me. What does he want?" He turned his head, his voice lower, carrying the weight of guilt. "He wanted Mia, not for revenge, for leverage, to make me sign over everything. The underground assets, the transport routes, the banks, all of it." A chill spread through me. "And you?" I didn't give him the chance. His eyes darkened. "I killed 2 of his men. That's why he declared war. Not for profit, for pride." Silence thickened between us. I looked at his hand on the white sheet, the knuckles scarred and strong. Beneath that cold control was a man who carried every wound as if it were his penance. "You can't carry the world alone," I murmured. "You can't protect everything." Dominic's gaze found mine, and there it was, a grief so deep, so old, it had become part of him. "I don't need to protect everything," he said quietly. "Just 2 people." My throat tightened. I took a clean cloth and dabbed gently at the blood that had seeped through his bandage. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just watched me. The space between us felt fragile, electric. I could hear his breathing, uneven at first, then slower. I felt the warmth radiating from him, and I realized I was trembling, not from fear, but from something softer, truer. As I leaned forward to tie the bandage, Dominic's fingers brushed my wrist. The lightest touch, yet it sent a shock through me. I lifted my head. His eyes met mine, and in that suspended moment, every wall between us fell away. He kissed me. It wasn't a fierce kiss or desperate. It was trembling, hesitant, filled with fear. As if we both knew that breathing too deeply would shatter it. His lips tasted of blood and medicine, but it was the breath of someone who had fought his way back from death. His hand came up to my face, tentative, pleading. When the kiss ended, he whispered, voice breaking, "I don't deserve anyone." I looked at him for a long time. In his eyes I saw everything, guilt, fear, longing. My voice shook, but it was steady enough to hold the truth. "Everyone deserves forgiveness, even you." Dominic closed his eyes, and a single tear slid down his cheek, not from pain, but release. For the first time, he wasn't the man commanding the world. He was just a man learning to believe that love didn't have to cost blood. Outside, the night was quiet. The rain had stopped. Wind sighed softly through the trees. I stayed by his bedside, my hand still holding his. The room glowed in the faint golden light, where a man covered in scars, both on his skin and in his heart, slept peacefully for the first time in years. And I knew then I wasn't leaving. No matter what came, no matter what fell apart, I would stay right here with him. Dominic healed faster than anyone expected. Just 3 days after the ambush, he was already on his feet. Each step slow, leaving faint traces of blood on the bandages beneath his shirt. He didn't talk much, he commanded. The entire villa was in motion. Guards doubled, codes changed, security systems checked again and again. A storm was coming, and we could all feel it. Lucia was the first to notice something was wrong. She barely slept for 2 nights, combing through reports, security feeds, and access logs. Early that morning, she entered Dominic's office, her face pale, a folder clutched tightly in her hand. "Someone's been feeding DeLuca information," she said, her voice taut as wire. "Every move we've made, even the ambush, he knew before it happened. It's someone inside." Dominic lifted his head, eyes sharp and cold. "Who?" Lucia laid the folder on the desk. Inside were photographs, text logs, bank transfers, proof too clear to deny. And when I saw the name, my stomach dropped. Luca Ferrano, the bodyguard who'd been with Dominic for years. The same man I'd seen helping Mia cut her pancakes that morning. Dominic said nothing for a long time, then quietly, "Bring him in." Minutes later, Luca was escorted into the room, hands bound behind his back. Sweat ran down his forehead. Dominic rose slowly, still limping, but his voice was a blade. "Why?" Luca kept his head down. Dominic took another step closer. "You worked beside me 10 years. I saved your life 3 times. And this is how you repay me?" Lucia's tone was ice. "He's been taking DeLuca's money for 8 months. They promised him a position when they take over." Dominic's jaw tightened, but he held himself still. "Tell me the plan, all of it." Luca trembled. Then the words spilled out in a broken rush. "DeLuca, he knows you're wounded. He said he'll strike the villa. Within 48 hours, no more deals. He wants to end it, for good." The room fell silent. I felt my heart stop for a beat. Dominic met Lucia's eyes, and with one look, they both understood. "Get Elena and Mia out," he said softly, turning toward me. "Tonight." I shook my head before I could think. "No, I'm not leaving you." "Elena," his voice was low but unyielding. "I can't fight if I know you're here." I grabbed his hand, his skin cold, his pulse strong beneath it. "What are you going to do?" "Clean house," he said quietly. "If I don't, they'll kill you." I stepped back, tears rising. "You don't have to kill anyone, Dominic. Please, stop this. We can run, disappear." He cut me off, his voice gravel and sorrow. "I tried to disappear once, but when they come for you, and for Mia, there's nowhere left to run." I had no answer. I could only look at him, at the scars, new and old, across his skin. The wounds on his body were nothing compared to the ones he carried inside. Lucia's voice softened. "If you're going through with this, let me help. We'll need every loyal man we have." Dominic nodded once. "Start now." His tone was final, commanding, calm, and fatal. I stood there as he gave orders, each word cutting through me like glass. By nightfall, the villa had gone eerily still. The sky was black, the wind howled across the lake, waves pounding the shore like drums of warning. From my window, I saw Dominic standing alone in the rain, shoulders trembling, not from cold, but from the fury he was trying to contain. And I knew then, in the next 48 hours, our world would change forever. The real storm wasn't the one outside. It was the one he was about to unleash to save us. The night sky was breathing fast. After Lucia discovered the traitor, the atmosphere inside the Caruso estate thickened into something almost tangible. Dominic didn't speak a single word all day. He just prepared in silence, checking his gun, changing his bandages, calling every remaining guard. He knew what was coming, and so did I. The storm was no longer far away. It was already at our door. When the clock struck midnight, the wind began to howl through the windows. The entire house seemed to tremble with each crash of thunder. I stood in the corridor watching Dominic and Lucia in the control room, two silhouettes, one cold and calculated, the other taut as a bow about to snap. The monitors glowed in pale blue, showing clusters of moving dots circling the property. Lucia leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the heat map. "They're here," she whispered, her voice heavy as lead. Dominic didn't blink. "How many?" 12, maybe more. They're spreading out in a V formation. They know what they're doing." He gave a small nod. "Hold position. No one fires until I give the order." Lucia turned, frowning. "You can't do this alone, Dominic. I'm not turning this place into a graveyard. This is home." His voice was rough, low but sharp as steel. "I won't make it a battlefield." I heard every word through the earpiece. My heart was pounding. Dominic left the control room, his dark coat brushing the flickering lights that trembled with the wind. He passed me in the hall, not stopping, only saying softly, "Hold Mia close. No matter what you hear, don't come out." Then he was gone, leaving behind the smell of gun oil and a silence that rang in my ears. I took Mia down to the safe room. It was small, sealed, the air faintly metallic. The light was dim, trembling like a heartbeat. She clutched her teddy bear and looked up at me, confused. "Mommy, why are we hiding?" I tried to smile. "It's just a game, sweetheart. Whoever stays quiet the longest wins." She giggled softly. I started to tell her a fairy tale, but my voice shook, each word breaking apart as above us, the storm and the sound of metal clashing blended together. Then came a blast that shook the floor. Mia flinched. I held her tight. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "Just thunder." But I knew it wasn't thunder. Upstairs, Lucia's voice came sharp through the comms. "They've cut power to the east side." "Switch to backup," Dominic replied, his tone calm in a way that frightened me more than anything. He moved through the corridor, his gun heavy in his hand. Rain shattered the glass windows, wind tearing the curtains free. The lights flickered, flashing across, the white marble floor like lightning caught indoors. DeLuca stepped through the main entrance. He didn't rush. He walked like a man certain of victory. His coat was drenched, his scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. "Dominic Caruso," he drawled, voice slick as oil. Once a king, now just a dog chained by a woman. Dominic didn't react. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at him. "Don't take another step, Marco. It ends here." "Ends," DeLuca laughed, the sound scraping like metal against metal. "No, my friend, Tonight, I take back everything. Your money, your name, and the girl you're trying so hard to protect." For a second, Dominic froze. His eyes darkened, then went utterly still. "Don't say their names." "Oh, I like that," DeLuca smirked. The Cold King actually knows fear. Thunder cracked outside. In the flash of white, both men drew their guns. The first shot tore through the air, sharp and final. Dominic dodged, the bullet grazing his shoulder, slicing through cloth and skin. He fired back, each shot precise and clean. DeLuca ducked behind a marble column, firing wildly. Sparks scattered across the floor. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, thick enough to choke. Dominic moved along the wall, blood seeping through his bandages, his breath coming short. He knew if he hesitated even a second, the man before him would destroy everything. DeLuca laughed, the sound echoing down the corridor. "You know, Dominic, I used to envy you. Look at you now, a broken man with a gun, and a woman who made you weak." "At least," Dominic said quietly, his voice heavy as iron, "I still have something to lose." When DeLuca leaned out from behind the pillar, Dominic fired, one shot perfect. The bullet hit his chest. DeLuca's body jerked, then collapsed, eyes wide open, the smile still carved into his face. Silence. Only the rain remained, tapping against the broken windows and Dominic's ragged breathing. Blood dripped from his shoulder onto the marble, streaking the white stone crimson. He looked around. The men who'd come with DeLuca lay still. It was over, finally over. He turned, staggering toward the stairs. Every step left a dark mark on the floor. By the time he reached the door to the safe room, he could barely stand, one hand pressed to the wall for balance. The door swung open. I looked up. Dominic stood there, bloody, torn, exhausted, but alive. "It's over," he whispered, his voice breaking apart with the words. "They're safe now." I ran to him, catching him just as his legs gave out. His blood was hot against my hands, heavy and real. I didn't know if he was alive, only that I couldn't let him go. My tears fell onto his neck, mixing with the rain, the blood, and everything this night had taken from us. Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant, but inside me there was only silence, except for his heartbeat, faint but still there. I clung to it as if it were the last fragile piece of hope left in the world. 3 days had passed since the hospital. The Caruso villa was silent as a tomb, only the faint sound of waves brushing the lake. Dominic was alive, the wound on his shoulder still bandaged beneath his black shirt. He hadn't rested once. The day he opened his eyes after the coma, he'd already ordered Aaron Price, Mia's biological father, taken to the old Caruso warehouse, on the outskirts of the city. Lucia had protested, but Dominic's reply was calm and final. "He's the last piece of this game. If we don't end it, he'll come back." That night, as the city lights flickered on, I went with him. The smell of oil, rust, and old dust hit me the moment I stepped inside. A yellow light hung from the ceiling, throwing long shadows over the man tied to a chair in the center of the room, Aaron Price. 6 years had passed, yet he still carried that same arrogance, the crooked smile, the alcohol-glazed eyes, the voice that turned my blood to ice. "Still as pretty as ever, Elena," he rasped. "Didn't think you'd end up as his plaything, though." Before I could react, Dominic stepped forward and struck him across the face. The crack echoed off the metal walls. Blood welled at the corner of Aaron's mouth. Dominic's voice was low and razor sharp. "You don't say her name." Aaron laughed, shaking his head. "Ah, right. Your bodyguard turned savior. Do you even know who he is, Elena? A devil in a tailored suit. He's killed dozens, and now it's my turn. Dominic leaned in, his hands gripping the arms of the chair, his face inches from Aaron's. No, I don't need to kill you. I just need you to sign this. He dropped a paper onto the table, the bold letters glaring up. Relinquishment of parental rights. Aaron glanced at it, then gave a short, mocking laugh. You think I'll sign that? In return, Dominic said calmly, you get money, a bank account enough to live on for the rest of your life in Europe, and a plane ticket out of the country tonight. Freedom, safety. All you have to do is disappear from their lives. He leaned back, laughing again, rough and cruel. Mia is my daughter, the only thing I own. You think I'd sell her? I could use her, make you beg. I know what she means to you, Dominic Caruso. Dominic's eyes darkened, still and lethal. I saw his hand tighten around the gun at his hip. One more second, and he would have pulled the trigger. I stepped forward, placing my hand on his shoulder, my voice trembling. Dominic, stop. Don't become him. He froze, breathing hard, then slowly let go. His gaze never left Aaron. No one dies tonight, I whispered, almost pleading. Aaron sneered. You're pathetic, Elena, always needing someone to save you. I met his eyes, the tremor inside me finally gone. No, Aaron, I don't need saving anymore. I just want my daughter to have peace, something you were never capable of giving her. Dominic unlocked the cuffs, pushed a pen toward the table. Sign it, or I'll make you wish you were dead. For a flicker of a second, fear flashed in Aaron's eyes, something he'd never shown before. He looked at the paper, at me, then at Dominic. His hands trembled. At last, he bent forward and scrawled his name across the line, the ink smearing over dried blood. Dominic nodded toward Lucia, who waited by the door. Take him to the airport. There's a flight at 10. And if he ever comes back... He paused, his tone dropping to a deadly whisper. He'll vanish for good. Aaron was dragged away, his footsteps scraping across the concrete, until they faded into the wind outside. I turned to Dominic. His eyes were dark, filled with anger, pain, and something softer beneath. A long silence passed before he spoke, his voice rough. I don't know if I hate him more, or myself. I reached out, resting my hand over his trembling one. You chose to let him live. That's what makes you different. He looked at me then, a faint light flickering in his eyes, fragile but real, like a spark that had survived the storm. And in that moment, I knew. Dominic Caruso, the man the city called a devil, had just saved his own soul. That afternoon, the last light of day spilled through the window, stretching across the tiled floor in long golden lines. 3 days had passed since Aaron left the country, and the Caruso estate had grown quiet again. But in the small medical room upstairs, where the smell of antiseptic still lingered, Dominic Caruso had not found peace. He sat propped against the bed, his shirt unbuttoned, the white bandage on his shoulder stained with dried blood. His face was hollow, his eyes dim like a lake after a storm. I entered, carrying a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. He glanced at me, then turned away, his voice hoarse. You don't have to do this every day. I know, I said softly, sitting beside the bed. But I want to. I wrung out the cloth and gently wiped his shoulder, where the skin was beginning to knit. Dominic winced, but didn't move. The late sunlight brushed across his cheek, highlighting the dark shadows beneath his eyes. After a moment, he murmured, I still hear the explosion, every night, When I closed my eyes, I froze. Sophia and our daughter, they died because of me. I stayed silent. Dominic inhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling. His voice came low, heavy like a confession. That night, I was supposed to go with them. Sophia wanted me home early for the fireworks festival. But I stayed behind for a meeting, a deal I thought would pull me out of the darkness. And when the explosion happened, I was sitting in my office, only a few miles away. I lived, they didn't. I looked at his hands, scarred, rough, the hands of a man who carried too much guilt. My voice trembled. You saved my child. You protected us, Dominic. You deserve forgiveness. He gave a faint, broken smile. I don't need forgiveness, Elena. I just need to believe that this time, I won't destroy what I love. I set the bowl down and looked at him. What do you think love is, Dominic? He didn't answer, so I went on, my tone soft. I used to think I was just a temporary part of someone's life, a replacement, a shadow. But with you, I don't feel small anymore. I feel alive. He turned to me, his gaze deep and unbearably sad. And in that moment, in that white, quiet room, we both understood. Neither of us came to save the other. We had simply found ourselves in each other's wounds. Dominic reached out, his hand brushing mine. It was cold, trembling with the fear of losing something he hadn't dared to hope for. I've lived like a man with nothing left to lose, he said softly. But when you came, I started to be afraid. Afraid you'd leave like they did. I gripped his hand, feeling the slow pulse beneath my fingers. I'm not Sophia, I whispered. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He nodded faintly, his eyes glistening as if he'd just heard something he'd long stopped believing in. I bent over to change his bandage carefully. Each time the gauze touched blood, my chest tightened. Not because of the wound, but because of what lay inside it. Guilt, sorrow, and a love buried too deep for too long. When I finished, Dominic took my hand, pulling me closer. We looked at each other in silence, words no longer needed. And then, in the fading light of evening, he held me, not out of pity, not out of loneliness, but because we both knew we had found something rare amidst the ruins. It wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, fragile, quiet, but real. Night settled softly over Lake Michigan, smooth as black silk stretching to the horizon. The moonlight spilled across the water, glimmering like fragments of broken memories. The Caruso estate stood quiet after days of chaos. I stood on the balcony, the night wind brushing through my hair, carrying the scent of the lake, of damp leaves, of a peace we had only just reclaimed. Behind me, the door opened. Dominic stepped out, silent as part of the night itself. His shoulder was still healing, and I saw him flinch whenever he moved too quickly. He came to stand beside me without a word. Together, we looked out over the lake, where the moon floated gently on the rippling surface. The world felt stripped down to just the wind and our breathing. After a long pause, Dominic spoke, his voice melting into the night air. I made a promise to Sophia that I would never love anyone again. He stopped, eyes fixed on the horizon, silver light reflecting in their depths. But maybe I've broken that promise. I turned to him. In the moonlight, his face looked carved from both shadow and light, strong yet exhausted. My chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from something tender. You're not betraying her, I said softly, almost a whisper. You're just living again. That's what she would have wanted. Dominic didn't answer. The breeze caught a strand of my hair and brushed it across his cheek. He didn't move away, only closed his eyes as if memorizing the feeling. Then, after a quiet moment, he spoke again, his voice lower, stripped of everything but truth. "If I told you I wanted you to stay, not because it's safe, but because I need you, would you?" The question left me breathless. Every sound fell away, leaving only the pounding of my heart. I looked out at the trembling reflection of the moon, unable to speak. Instead, I leaned my head gently against his shoulder. Dominic exhaled, his body tense for a moment, then relaxing. I felt the warmth of him through the cool night air. We sat like that, saying nothing. Both of us understood that sometimes silence is the truest answer. After a while, he said quietly, his voice rough with honesty, "I don't want to lie anymore, Elena. I've spent half my life hiding, forgetting, burying. But if this is a beginning, I want it to be real. No masks, no pretending." I lifted my head, meeting his gaze. "Then let it start now," I said, reaching for his hand. He took it, fingers closing around mine. His palm was rough, warm, scarred, the marks of a past I didn't want to erase. The moonlight poured over us, gentle and clear. In that glow, I saw his eyes, not dark or cold anymore, but faintly lit with something fragile and painfully real. We stayed there a long time, hand in hand, surrounded by the stillness of night. No false promises, no fear, just two people, broken and lost, who had finally found each other in the dark. I knew the road ahead would still be long and shadowed, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. Only our breaths, our hearts, and the fragile peace between us. When Dominic turned to me, he whispered, "Thank you, Elena, for not leaving." I smiled, saying nothing. His gratitude was the promise I had been waiting for, not spoken in words, but in the quiet certainty of our being there together. Beneath the silver moonlight, we held hands in silence, and in the breath of that night I knew we had finally begun to love, for real. The next morning, the first sunlight after days of rain streamed across the glass walls of Caruso Group. Chicago seemed to exhale, the storm finally gone. In the top-floor office, Dominic Caruso sat behind a walnut desk, his gray suit crisp, his shoulder newly bandaged. Light fell across his face, softening the darkness that had lived in his eyes for so long. Lucia entered, carrying a thick folder. Her steps were as sharp as ever, but her expression had changed, softer, lighter. "I never thought I'd see you actually smile," she said, setting the folder down. Dominic looked up, a faint curve at the corner of his lips. "And I never thought I'd have a reason to." Lucia sat opposite him, opening the file. "I just received official word from the Department of Justice. They're investigating what's left of DeLuca's organization. If everything goes as expected, his assets and operations will be frozen." She paused, eyes meeting his. "And we can finally come clean." Dominic was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting to the wide window where the lake shimmered in the distance. "Come clean," he repeated quietly. "A beautiful phrase. But tell me, Lucia, does anyone ever truly get clean?" Lucia tilted her head. "You have a chance to start over. Turn everything the Caruso Group does legitimate. Real estate, logistics, banking. We can erase the old scars." Dominic leaned back, thoughtful. His tone was calm now, weary but resolute. "I've thought about it all night, and maybe it's time." His eyes lifted, clear and firm. "From today, the Caruso Group goes legitimate. No smuggling, no networks, no violence. We'll live by the law, even if we have to start from nothing." Lucia smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. You know, Sophia once hoped she'd hear you say that someday. Dominic nodded, his gaze distant. Maybe, somewhere, she's listening. The office fell silent for a moment, the only sound the soft hum of the wind against the glass. Lucia flipped to the last page of the report and asked, her voice softer now, almost teasing, "And what about her?" Dominic looked up. Her? Lucia's smile deepened. Elena. He didn't answer right away. His eyes turned toward the garden beyond the glass. Down below, sunlight spilled across the lawn. Under the trees, Elena sat on a stone bench, her brown hair glowing in the morning light. Mia ran circles around her, laughing, clutching a small blue kite. The sight reflected in Dominic's eyes like a memory he had never thought he'd earn back. Finally he spoke, his voice low but warm. "She's the one thing I don't want to rationalize." Lucia's smile softened. "It's rare to hear you speak from the heart, Dominic." He shrugged lightly, a faint grin crossing his face. Maybe because until now I didn't have anyone to speak to. Lucia gathered the folder and stopped by the door. "You know," she said quietly, "after everything, maybe you've done the impossible, walked out of the darkness without losing your soul." When the door closed behind her, Dominic stayed where he was, eyes still on the garden. Outside, Elena looked up and caught his gaze through the glass. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Dominic realized that peace wasn't something won through blood. It was something found in the smile of that woman, in a child's laughter, and in the quiet breath of a new morning. Dawn rose slowly over Lake Michigan, soft and hazy, like a painting breathed to life. Mist hugged the shoreline while the first blush of morning spread across the water, tinting the world in gentle hues of beginning. No more gunfire, no shadows, no bodyguards. Only the wind, the lake, and the two of us walking side by side. Dominic held my hand as we walked along the shore. His coat fluttered in the cool breeze, his scent mixed with dew and grass, warm, grounding, achingly close. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt sacred, filled only by our footsteps, in the sand and the rhythm of shared breathing. When we reached a curve in the shoreline where the waves brushed the stone steps, Dominic stopped and turned toward me. The morning light grazed his face, tracing the faint scar along his jaw, a reminder of battles fought, losses endured, and redemption earned. He slipped a small velvet box from his pocket, its edges worn with time. When he opened it, a simple silver ring gleamed inside, old but still luminous, carrying the weight of an unfinished story. "I used to think," Dominic began, his voice blending with the wind, "that this ring only stood for death, for guilt, for everything I'd lost. But now—" He paused, lifting his gaze to mine. His eyes were steady, clear. "Now I want it to mark a different beginning." I stood frozen, heart pounding, tears rising before I could stop them. I knew this was Sophia's ring, the one he had kept locked away all these years. Yet when he placed it in my palm, I didn't feel jealousy or fear. I felt my chest tremble, because for the first time, he was letting me into the deepest part of himself. Dominic sank to one knee on the damp sand. He didn't say, "Will you marry me?" He simply looked at me, long and quiet, as though memorizing my face in the light of dawn. His voice was deep and tender. "Elena, give me the chance to protect you, not out of duty, but out of love." I couldn't speak. Words would have broken the moment. My tears fell freely, mingling with laughter. A single nod, small, trembling but true, was enough to shatter every wall that had ever stood between us. Dominic smiled, that rare, real smile. He slid the ring onto my finger. The metal was cool against my skin, yet it felt warm because it no longer symbolized loss, but promise. I bent down and wrapped my arms around him. He held me tight, as if afraid the mist might swallow us whole. But it didn't. It only wrapped around us softly, like a morning embrace. From the second-floor window of the villa, Lucia stood with a cup of coffee, watching silently. When she saw her brother kneeling in the blush of dawn, she smiled, a quiet, peaceful smile, the kind born from seeing something pure in a world that had once been drenched in blood. Outside, Mia's laughter rang through the garden. She chased a white cat, her nightgown streaked with dirt, her hair wild and bright with life. I turned to look, my heart full. Dominic rose, took my hand, his gaze following the little girl, the gaze of a father, no longer afraid. The sun crested the lake, tearing through the mist. Golden light poured over the three of us. A man who had lived in darkness, a woman who had once feared the light, and a child who embodied everything good that had survived. We stood there, silent. Only the dawn bore witness to the vow unspoken, that from this moment on, our lives would no longer be defined by fear or escape, but by love, the kind that heals, the kind that endures, like sunlight touching every scar that once defined us.